Hey everyone, it's Reilly. So, a few episodes ago I mentioned going to Nagano to go skiing, and that I might talk about it on an episode. And so that's this one. But I decided I'm going to talk about more than just the one trip, because I feel like that might not be the most interesting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like how I got into skiing, I guess my history of skiing, and also maybe some of the differences between skiing in America and skiing in Japan. So if you'd like to, please follow me on Instagram at Reilly Sullivan XD, and Sota is eigonosota. That's about it. So without further ado, let's go. Okay, so I got into skiing when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. Anyway, in like elementary school. And that time I lived in Illinois, like kind of near Chicago. Illinois is not a state that's very famous for its mountains. In fact, it's pretty famous for being flat. So there wasn't a ton of good skiing in the area, which is probably why it took so long, I guess, for me to get started. Sometimes you go skiing and you see kids that are, barely able to walk, but they're able to ski. But that wasn't me. I started a little bit later than that, even though my dad had been into skiing for a long time, at least. So we went to some really small, basically hill. I don't remember the name of the place, but I don't know if it called itself something mountain or not, but it certainly wasn't a mountain. It was just a little tiny hill, but it was probably a good place to learn how to ski. And I remember that skiing the first day was a little bit difficult. I'm sure I fell a few times, but after maybe a couple hours, I got the hang of it. I've also tried snowboarding once. I won't talk too much about that this episode, but I tried snowboarding I think I was in high school when I first tried it. And it was a super hard first day. I actually did it for 2 days, and both days I was just falling constantly. It's like really tiring, I should say, to have to like take off one of your boots out of the strap because you can't move if it's flat. If you're not going down a hill on a snowboard, it's pretty hard to move. While with skis, you can kind of like skate around, or you can push yourself on your poles. So for that reason and maybe a couple of other reasons, I'm more of a skier. But anyway, after elementary school, my family moved to Maryland, where I usually say I'm from. And there were a few more ski areas around there. Again, Maryland doesn't have a ton of really big mountains, but it's got some. The Appalachian Mountains go pretty close to Maryland. So we would ski mostly in Pennsylvania, actually, just over the border. It was only like a 45-minute, maybe hour drive from my house. So in junior high school, we would go during the winter, probably every other weekend just about. So I would probably ski, about 10 times a year, maybe something like that, 10 weekends a year. Like I said, it was a pretty small ski area, nothing huge that we would go to, but it had different kinds of runs. In the U.S., the difficulty of the course, or the run as we might call it, is by color. So like the easiest one is green, and usually it's a circle, but we usually just say a green run. The next most difficult, intermediate, you might say, is blue. It's like a square, usually on the map. So a blue, and then there's black diamonds. Black diamonds are the ones that almost always you say the color and the shape for some reason. Black diamonds are pretty difficult, and then there's double black diamonds, which are like expert only, basically. Double black diamonds are usually the ones that have moguls, the little bumps that you might see in the Olympics where people are turning really fast to get around those bumps. Sometimes you might see those on a black diamond, but on a blue or a green, you'd pretty much never see them. But anyway, this mountain had plenty of greens and blues, a couple of blacks, and I think maybe one black diamond, but that was one double black, I should say. Not the most accurate double black diamond. I don't think it was really all that difficult. because I was able to ski it probably in junior high school without too much trouble. But at that time, I would go skiing with my dad, and then every once in a while, I had a couple of friends, 2 brothers, that would come along with us. And skiing for me then was kind of more a challenge than anything else. Like, my dad would always challenge me to try to do the harder stuff because I guess he wanted to ski together, and he really wanted to ski like the Black Diamonds and stuff. And I, for a long time, was only confident on the blues. And if he really pressured me, I would try to do a Black Diamond or something like that. But for the most part, I like doing the intermediate runs, the blues. But then when I started skiing more with my friends, it became more of a competition, who could ski down the best. I was never that into being the fastest, maybe because I was scared or just because I don't know, I don't think it's that cool to ski really fast. I'm more into I think it's cooler to ski beautifully, if you will. I don't know, that sounds kind of weird, but if you can turn really nicely and really smoothly, that's a lot more fun to me and a lot better to look at from a bystander perspective than just skiing fast. And speaking of that, I remember there was one year, probably early on, maybe 6th grade for me, which is the first year of junior high school in America. I was a little bit reluctant to go on Black Diamonds, and my dad was trying to teach me, but I wasn't really getting better enough to really be confident on them. So he decided to get me a lesson, which as far as I know is the only lesson I've ever taken. There might have been one when I was really young at the beginning, but I don't remember it. But anyway, I took this lesson. It was like a intermediate going to advanced lesson, and there was only one other boy in the lesson with me. And so I was trying to learn how to ski parallel, which in skiing, if you've ever skied before, you usually start out learning what in America we call the pizza, where you put the tips of your skis, the front part of your skis together, and the backs are kind of spread apart, so it looks like a pizza slice or maybe a triangle or something like that. And you do that because it's easy to break and it's pretty easy to turn if you ski like that, and you can control your speed. But if you've ever seen Olympic skiing, real skiers, good skiers, ski with their 2 skis in a line, basically, parallel to each other. And that is a lot harder to turn because you need to have a lot more control of your skis. And there's a possibility for going fast. If you put both your skis straight down toward the bottom of the hill, you end up going pretty fast. So you need to be able to control them better. So anyway, I was taking this lesson, and the instructor was teaching me to kind of sit down, not exactly sit down, but you kind of put your butt down further and kind of push your knees further forward, and that creates a little bit more control when you're doing a turn. And so I was trying to master this, and meanwhile, the other kid, let's call him Reed, I think that was his name, was doing a pizza and just going as fast as possible as he could down the mountain. Just I would be with the instructor and he would say, okay, Reed, wait back there. I'm going to take Reilly to try to do a few turns. And then, a few seconds later, you see this kid yelling and just zooming down the mountain in a pizza shape, not at all trying to really turn or ski parallel or anything like that. And he wanted to do it. It wasn't like an accident. He wasn't exactly out of control, but he was going way faster than anyone else around him, and he certainly wasn't really trying to learn anything from the lesson. So I just remember being a little disappointed because the instructor kind of had to spend a lot of time with him trying to teach him how to slow down, basically, and I didn't get to fully learn how to ski parallel. But anyway, just a weird story from back then. Somewhere around that time, it might have been 7th grade or something like that, I started going out west to ski. So most of the really good, the top-notch skiing in America is out west in Colorado, Utah, maybe California has some stuff like that. So my dad had some friends from college, I think, who actually owned houses in Colorado, actually both in Colorado, I think. Colorado is a state almost to the west of the country on the Rocky Mountains, has a lot of skiing. So one of his friends had a villa, small house in Vail, Colorado, which is one of the most famous ski resorts in the world. And something about skiing in the West that was really different from skiing in the East Coast of America was out West, it seems like a much more of a rich person thing. Like, if you go to Vail, the mountain village or whatever you call it, where the shops and the restaurants and stuff are at the bottom of the mountain, there's like Dior and Gucci shops, and a lot of the restaurants are like fine dining restaurants, with like 20 courses and stuff like that. Meanwhile, I was used to on the East Coast, there's like a little lodge at the bottom of the mountain where you can get, a hamburger, French fries, whatever kind of fast food like stuff, maybe some soup or something warm. But not a ton of like nice restaurants and nothing like that. And there might be like a ski shop you can buy or rent skis at, but no Gucci or even nothing close. So that's one of the big differences between the West and the East. And the other big difference is obviously the size. I mean, the mountains out West are a completely different game. The ski areas are often huge. Vail, where I probably did most of my skiing out West, had, it was so big that you couldn't possibly ski everything in a day, even if you tried. You probably couldn't ski everything in a long weekend if you skied for 3 days. It was enormous, and I remember being shocked by just how big it is and also how good it was. Out East, at least where I skied for the most part, you would ski up one lift, and then you would have like 3 or 4 choices of runs to go down, and then you would go down that run and go back up the lift. But in the West, in the Rocky Mountains, you could ski up a really long lift, and then you would have multiple runs that go together or are like super long, and it could take you, 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour to ride all the way down if you went like a long, slow, cruising, easy green. But that was a big difference. And also at that mountain, I remember the run, basically. In Vail, there were these things called the back bowls. So it's like the back of the mountain, and it's above the tree line, I believe is why it's like this. Meaning it's so high that trees don't grow there anymore, not much. And so it's like completely open, and there are these really long, wide runs, and it's like a bowl shape, it's kind of like almost a half circle where you can kind of ski almost all the way across the mountain if you wanted to. But I remember they were black diamonds or maybe even double blacks, I'm not sure, but it was a much steeper run than I'd tried, or maybe that even existed on the East Coast. And I remember skiing it and doing pretty well because I had so much space. And that was kind of the moment when I started to get good at skiing. And then from then on, when I went back east, later that winter or next winter or whenever, I could ski everything at my home mountain, my home ski resort with like no problem. Everything was not easy. I don't want to say like a double black diamond on the East Coast became easy for me, but it was doable. Like I could do it without being like super scared. So that was a big change for me, I guess, skiing. Then, I guess I did that a few more times. We skied at a few more places out west. Telluride in Colorado was a good one. Snowbird and Powder Mountain in Utah. Powder Mountain to this day is probably my favorite ski area ever. It just has this, it's never crowded. I think they limit how many people are allowed to buy tickets every day. And it's really big and kind of like low tech. It doesn't have the vibe of these like rich people Vail type mountains, but anyway, that's not super important for the episode, I guess. From then on, I moved to Japan after university. In university, I basically didn't go skiing at all. Maybe in the winter, if my dad invited me on a trip somewhere, I would go, but I don't think I went back to my quote-unquote home mountain in near Maryland and Pennsylvania during university at all. And then I came to Japan, and I went skiing once with some friends in Shiga Prefecture, and most of them had never skied before, so I kind of spent most of that ski trip teaching other people how to ski and skiing on the kind of easier green runs. Maybe I think one guy was able to get up to doing blue runs by the end of the day. But for the most part, I was just kind of there to hang out with friends and ski with them rather than to like challenge myself or whatever. And I think that's the big difference now with like skiing as an adult versus skiing when I was a kid, is that skiing is not so much about the challenge, about doing the hardest possible run, or anything like that, or never about being the fastest. But I wasn't competing with anybody at any point. It's just kind of about enjoying the day, enjoying the snow and the views, really. And so then, about 2020. Yeah, it must have been end of 2019, beginning of 2020. I went to Nagano for the first time with my dad and with Yuki, and we went skiing mostly at Hakuba in Nagano, and then on the other side in Shigakogen for the last day or two. And Hakuba was really fun. It's like kind of, at least the area we stayed in this hostel where like there were a lot of other foreign people there, a lot of English people, meaning from England, and a lot of Australians. And so like actually staying in the hostel was really fun. There were a lot of people to talk to, and it was like kind of a party atmosphere, I guess. And even that whole street was full of hostels and hotels like that. And there were a bunch of bars that pretty much catered to foreigners for the most part. And there were like restaurants that served Australian meat pies because there were so many Australians. But Hakuba itself, it seems like a really cool resort. There's like several different mountains you can go to, and it's really big, and there's a lot of different kinds of skiing you can do. But on that particular winter, it was, end of the year, December, so it was kind of early in the skiing season, and there hadn't been a lot of snow, so a lot of stuff wasn't actually open. The stuff that was open was really crowded, so it wasn't great. But on the other end of that, when we went to Shigakogen later in the vacation, the lines were much less, the crowds were much better. I guess that's kind of the same thing. And the snow was way better. I don't know why. It was, it's only, I don't know, maybe 100 kilometers away, probably less. But the snow was just way better. And pretty much all the mountains there, all the different ski areas are connected. You can ski from one to the other without like getting into a bus or something like that, which you actually had to do at Hakuba if you wanted to ski a ton of different areas in one day. But the difference was, at Shigakogen, it's more like the kind of traditional Japanese onsen or hotel, maybe not ryokan, but maybe that exists, I'm not sure. And so you kind of just go to your hotel and ski and then come home. And that brings me to the most recent trip, which I'll keep kind of short because we're running a bit long now. But yeah, so Yuki and I went over the long weekend in February, and we got a hotel that was like right next to the slopes. I mean, you could put your skis on outside the hotel door and ski down onto the mountain, I guess. And that was great. And the purpose of the trip was pretty much skiing, so I didn't really care about much else. That being said, the hotel was pretty old, maybe built in the 70s, I'm guessing, and probably not renovated too much since then. The carpet was like very obviously old-fashioned, and a few other things were pretty noticeable. One of the things was the food. It was like I don't know, almost cafeteria style food, where kind of there was a time that you could go to dinner at the hotel, like let's say 6 o'clock, and then at 6 o'clock they put out all of these like trays of food, which were kind of, I guess, I don't know what you would call it. It was not exactly traditional Japanese food, but kind of Japanese mixed with like Chinese stuff. Like there was like karage and yakisoba and stuff. I forget what the chili shrimp thing is called. But they had that and some other things, but nothing super exciting, and everything was kind of mediocre. I mean, it's like a buffet. But yeah, the disappointing thing was, because you're staying in this hotel and you're on a mountain and there's nothing else really close to you, you don't really have an option of where to eat. Because if you go to a restaurant, then there's not really a way to get back to your hotel, at least where we were staying. There might be other areas of Shigakogen that are kind of more like a mini town where you can walk around, but at least at ours there was nowhere to walk. But anyway, that's the kind of downside of the trip. But even then, it wasn't so bad. It was food, and we were able to eat, and we were focusing on the skiing anyway. And the skiing was really good. I mean, it's just a really nice ski area where everything is connected. The snow was not spectacular. It was covered. You could ski pretty much everything, which is good enough for me. But it hadn't snowed any fresh snow in a while, so some things were kind of icy a little bit. Like so many people have skied over it that it had become kind of too smooth, I guess you could say. Like it was a little bit icy, a little bit hard to turn sometimes. Hard to control your turn, I should say. But yeah, the first day, Yuki, it had been since before COVID that we skied, and so Yuki was a little bit rusty. She'd only skied a few times before with me. And so you get from the hotel and you immediately get into this intermediate run. I think a blue. I guess in Japan it wouldn't be a blue, I think, right? It's a red if it's intermediate. I don't remember exactly. But anyway, an intermediate run. And so she kind of had this tough situation where the first time she puts on her skis, she immediately has a challenging run to do. But she took it slow and she managed to get down to some greens, some beginner runs, and she was able to do that for a while. And then on the second day, she was a little bit better, a little bit more confident. But because it was like a long weekend, it was kind of busy a little bit, and the snow had been skied out even more, so it was starting to show patches of dirt and like kind of grass or whatever underneath the snow. So the skiing wasn't as good the second day, but still it was fine. I mean, you could find parts that were nice and still had enough snow on them, and the ski area is big enough that we were able to ski a ton of different runs. And then toward the end of the day, we went up to what I might be mistaken, but I think is one of the highest lift-served mountains in Japan. So basically it's like one of the highest places you can take a chairlift up to. And you get up to the top of this chairlift, and you look back down the mountain, and you can't see that far over the horizon because everything is covered in clouds. But then at the very edge of the horizon, you can see other mountains kind of peeking through this kind of sea of clouds look, and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. And so we just kind of sat there for a little bit looking, and then skied down. And then the third day, we had to get back home, so we only skied like a half a day. And we were skiing in this area that had a lot of easier runs, and then it started snowing like crazy. And actually, it was the best snow of the trip because we were getting this new snow, and we were able to do a couple of really great runs with fresh snow and yeah, powder, you might say. But it got so bad, and it was actually so windy that they had to close some of the lifts. And then at that point, we weren't able to get back to our hotel from where we were. You couldn't take a lift there anymore. It used to be that you would take a lift up to one run, and then you would kind of ski over like the shoulder of the mountain to get down to where our hotel was. But because a lot of the lifts weren't running, I think technically we were able to go if we did a black, one of the difficult runs, but Yuki wasn't super confident and didn't want to do it, so she said she'd rather take a bus, and I said, yeah, of course, that's fine. And so we took a bus back to the hotel, we thought, but it turns out that actually we were going the wrong way, so we went to the complete other side of Shigakogen on the bus, and then got off and had to wait, I don't know, a little while for the next bus. But at that point, we basically couldn't get any more skiing done that day, so we just went back to the hotel, checked out, got our stuff, and went home. But the whole thing and the whole difference from when I was a kid, I mentioned a little bit earlier, was that the skiing, even though the snow wasn't great, and it was a little bit more crowded than I'd like, the the atmosphere, just being out in the snow, being out in the cold kind of, but having those moments when you get to go in for lunch or for a coffee or whatever, and you get to feel that cozy warmth, and the whole environment of mountains and forests and seeing that view from the top of the mountain. That's more what skiing is about for me now. And also, of course, spending time with other people. I mean, spending time with Yuki, for, basically we spent whatever those 3 days almost entirely together without break, which was great. And then we took the train home, and the train from Nagano back to Kagawa was like something like 10 hours. So it was a little bit of a trip, but it was worth it. It was a really good time. And yeah, I guess this episode's getting into over 25 minutes or so now. So I'll end it there. Thanks for listening, everybody. See ya. Talk to you next time. Bye.